guys, we're going to go ahead and get started with our training this morning for the harassment webinar training for the Sheriff's Department. Thank you guys for logging in and attending. The information that we're going to cover today is very important because more employees have been terminated for harassment than any other Title VII violation in the last 3 years here in the United States. So it's very important that we understand what behaviors constitute harassment, and you guys have an idea of kind of what the expectations are. But what we're finding here in Madison County is that employees either didn't know their rights or were afraid to report harassment, or they were told that they could not break the chain of command to report their harassment. So we're going to talk about all those issues today, along with some things that may seem innocent to you, but actually turn out to be offensive to others around you. And many times what one person believes not to be offensive turns out to be offensive because it offends someone else. This training is going to take a little less than an hour for us to complete, but I promise that you will learn something, and that something could be the one thing that saves your job in the future. And if you have questions during the training today, there is a questions tab on the menu bar on your screen. It's down toward the bottom of your menu bar. Simply key in your question and hit submit, and we will respond to your question in real time. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first that we're going to talk about is the Madison County Harassment Policy. We are required to provide every employee an environment that is free from harassment and investigate claims of harassment and take action when necessary. And I'm going to say this multiple times during this training, but if you are being harassed or you know of a coworker that is being harassed, please, please notify personnel. It's not okay. It's not a part of every job. It's not just business as usual for people to be bothered at work or to be harassed or bullied or the things that we're going to talk about today. You do not have to put up with it. We do not want you to put up with it, but we can't stop what we don't know about. There are over 1,000 employees in Madison County, and it's spread out over a big county, and there's no way we can know everything that is going on. But I promise you, if you contact personnel and tell us that you or a coworker here, that you're being harassed, we will put a stop to it. Okay? And there's a process that we follow, and I'm going to go through that with you. Also, we have included a copy of the Madison County policy for you to download from the handout section there on your menu bar. You can download and read that. So what is sexual harassment? The county's harassment policy defines sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, visual, verbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. And the harassers can be of the same sex. And one thing I want you to understand today is that harassment is all about perception. Harassment is all about perception. What might be okay for two employees to talk about between themselves may not be perceived as okay for another employee. So just kind of give you an example. If two employees are telling jokes to one another, off-color, inappropriate jokes, but between them and what they talk about, well, it's okay. But if another employee overhears them talking about that or telling those jokes or making those remarks, and they find it offensive, well, that's all it takes for those two employees, to get in trouble. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is always remain professional at work. Keep your comments and your jokes and the sexual innuendos and all those things away from work. If you want to talk about that at home or at the bar or the restaurant or wherever, that's fine. But when you get in your patrol car or you come to the office to work, leave that stuff alone, because another person may find that offensive, and that's all it takes to get us in trouble. Okay? So what are the types of sexual harassment? There are two types of sexual harassment. The first one is quid pro quo, which literally means this for that, and that usually involves sexual favors for preferential treatment, which include raises and promotions, better shifts of work, etc. Normally, this type of harassment will involve a supervisor offering a secretary or someone in their office more pay or promotion for sexual favors. do not see that one quite as much as we do the second kind, which is hostile work environment. This is the most frequently claimed type of harassment and usually involves a coworker making sexual advances toward another employee to the point where the employee cannot do their job. Any type of sexual advance that makes the employee feel uncomfortable, scared, bullied, or afraid to come to work can be considered a hostile work environment. This is the one that we see the most. Usually it's a male starts picking on a female because they think they're cute or they're attractive or something. They try to get their attention, and the female doesn't want anything to do with it, and starts to feel pressure, starts to feel bullied, and begins not to want to come to work. Their job performance begins to drop. So that's what hostile work environment is. But again, I said it before, how do we stop that? We contact personnel, and we tell personnel that we're being harassed and we need it to stop. The next thing I'm going to show you are some signs and some posters and attachments that have gotten employees in trouble, not in Madison County, okay? These are just what I found on the web as examples of harassment cases, things that got people in trouble because someone thought that these were cute and funny. But they put it in their office, they put it on their wall, they put it on their desk, they sent it as an email attachment to someone who may not have thought it was offensive, but someone else saw it and took offense to it, and that's how they got in trouble. So I encourage you to think before you send something, think before you say something. If you think, could this get me in trouble? Is this really something that needs to be in the workplace? And I can assure you everything that you're looking at right now is not okay to be in the workplace and got someone in trouble along the way. But again, it's just being professional and think before we send or before we say something. So now let's talk about some examples and the progressive nature of unwelcome conduct. Now this is not an exhaustive list, this is not everything, but this is what research shows tends to happen, okay? This is how harassment tends to start. It starts with one employee staring at or leering at what's called elevator eyes, looking someone up and down, and it starts there, and then it works its way on down. But do you see, as you work your way down that list, how the harassment becomes more serious? And if it's left unchecked, if they're not told to stop by the employee, if they're not told to stop by personnel because it was reported, you can see that it ends up with unwanted sexual advances and physical touching. Okay? So where should this type of harassment be stopped? Where should the employee tell the person to stop? Well, I've driven a line there under catcalls and whistling, but you can certainly do it under the first one there. But at some point, the employee has to tell the other employee to stop, or they have to come to personnel, because if they don't, it will progressively get worse. Harassers rarely start with inappropriately touching someone. They usually start with flirting and making comments to see how far the victim will let them go before moving on to the next step in the harassment. Guys, what they want to see is how far will you let it go? Can they go to the next step before you tell them to stop? And please, don't think that this is normal. It's not just business as usual for we to make comments or to put signs up that are inappropriate, to make sexual gestures or to inappropriately touch someone else. That's not okay. And if that's happening to you, there is a simple way to fix that, and that is to report it to personnel. Now, there are other types of harassment that I want to cover. Bullying, you're hearing more and more about bullying. It seems like that more now is going under bullying. Hazing against staff members, race and religion, age, disability. I found it interesting that a court in Florida held that fat jokes directed at an obese employee violated the ADA. And a New Jersey court recently has found that a person could bring a claim for disability harassment based upon 2 remarks made about his diabetic condition. And of course, sexual orientation and marital status that we've heard a lot about in the news within the last year. So guys, all that to say, you just have to be careful with what you say. You never know when something that sounds innocent to you may be offensive to someone else. Okay? Guys, I've said this in other trainings, and I'll continue to say it. If our employees will show up every day that they're scheduled, on time, do their job, keep their nose in their own business, keep their hands to themselves, we will pay you every 2 weeks. It's when we get into all this other stuff that we tend to get in trouble. So again, I just encourage you to watch what you say. And a couple other type of harassments that we're hearing more about now is gender identification and political beliefs. The EEOC recently awarded a transgender employee $182,000 for harassment that took place at where they work. So one employee got $182,000 because they were harassed for being transgender. And we're hearing more about that. Political beliefs, we know that we have an election coming up in November, and a lot of folks are saying this is going to be the most highly contested and dirty, nasty election that the U.S. has ever seen. And there's a lot of people on either side that are angry, and so a lot is being said about that. But I encourage you to keep your opinions and discussions away from the workplace, okay? Because you never know who's going to take offense to what you're saying. I also would recommend that you examine your coworkers that you tend to associate with. Do they participate in these kinds of harassment activities? If so, they can get you in trouble if you tend to be the person that goes along to have friends. Guys, I've seen employees disciplined simply because they were guilty by association. They went along just to get along. They wanted to be friends. They wanted to hang out with the in crowd who got into stuff like this, and they went along just have friends, and it ended up getting them into trouble. So be careful with who you're hanging out with at work. So who can be a victim? Obviously, an employee who is targeted, who is a target of their harassment, a third-party person or employee who overhears or witnesses the offensive conduct, or a customer visiting the courthouse or another department. Again, an employee can get into trouble because a third party, whether that be another employee or a customer, overhears a conversation that you're having with someone else, and they take offense to it. Now, that doesn't mean that that employee will be terminated for that. It just means that we'll have to investigate and see what went on, and some form of disciplinary action may have to be taken. But just as a reminder, be careful what you say at work. And who can be the harasser? That can be an employee supervisor or the manager. We said earlier that that's probably quid pro quo. A fellow employee from within the department or in another department, a vendor or supplier to the county. That's something that most employees don't ever think about. If you have a vendor that comes to your office and brings supplies, and they make inappropriate comments to you, you don't have to put up with that. Just because they're not an employee of the county doesn't mean that you have to put up with it. Let us know. We'll make sure that we get that corrected for you. Again, you do not have to put up with it. Okay. Now, the most important thing that we're going to cover today is the process for reporting the harassment. And if you don't get anything else I say today, I need you to hear this. Okay. Number one, report any type of harassment to the personnel office immediately. There is no chain of command requirement with harassment. Let me repeat that. There is no chain of command requirement for the harassment. What we have found recently is that employees thought that they had to go up their chain of command to report harassment. That is not true. That's one of the reasons why we're having this training today. You do not have to notify your supervisor or your manager if you're being harassed. The law allows you to go around that. Now, obviously, we have chain of command for other things, and that's needed, and that's fine. But when it comes to any type of harassment, that's totally different. You do not have to rely on chain of command to report your harassment. You can come to the personnel office and talk to us, and we will help you through that, okay? We will conduct an investigation, we'll collect statements, and we'll interview all those involved, and we will take action if necessarily. Most importantly, we will stop the harassment from occurring. Sometimes females are afraid to report their harassment because they don't want to get the employee in trouble. But the harassment will only progress, and the employee will soon dread coming to work and have an impact on their job performance, even in their personal life away from work. Sometimes females are afraid to report it, and because they don't want to get someone fired, they just think, oh, well, it'll stop. But as we've already shown, it's not going to stop. It's only going to get worse. Okay? So you do have to let us know about that. And I'll talk to the supervisors for just a moment. Now, if you have an employee that suddenly is not performing well, they're missing work more frequently, and they don't seem to be themselves, it's okay to ask them what's going on. It could be something personal that they don't want to talk about, and that's fine. Or it could actually be some type of harassment. And if an employee's work performance begins to slip, start asking questions. They may not want to talk about it, and that's fine. But it could be some type of someone bothering them, someone making threats against them, someone making some type of advancement against them, and they've just tried to deal with it themselves. They thought, well, it'll get better. But supervisors, you have an obligation to find out what's going on. And let me set it with this. If they tell you that they're being harassed or bothered, you have to immediately report that to the personnel office, because we have a legal obligation by law to investigate and take action if necessary. Okay? So don't think that it's okay, all right? And you can go around the chain of command if necessary. One of the last things that we're going to talk about is the retaliation. And this includes retaliation against someone who resists illegal behavior, that reports or participates in an investigation. If you're being harassed, please don't let the fear of being punished stop you from reporting it. Okay? Let me repeat that. If you're being harassed, please don't let the fear of being punished or disciplined stop you from reporting it. It's against law to take adverse action against an employee who accurately reports harassment. Now, if an employee files a false claim or they make false allegations, they may face serious disciplinary action up to and including termination as a result of the fake claims. Sometimes employees get mad at a supervisor for whatever reason, and they decide they're going to file some type of harassment claim against them. And we investigate. And what actually turns out during the investigation, sometimes if it's false, is that the employee is just as guilty as the supervisor, or even more so, for instigating it or starting it. So, but that's very, very rare. But again, if you're being harassed or if you have a coworker that is being harassed, please know that as long as everything that you say is truthful, then you're not going to be punished for that. Okay? And the last thing that we're going to talk about is the training summary. Just summarize what all that we talked about. Please remain professional at all times while you're at work. Refrain from inappropriate communication with coworkers while away and at work. Just because you're off shift and your supervisor's on shift doesn't mean that you can send them dirty text messages, okay? That is not okay, all right? And also report harassment of any kind, and remember there is no chain of command for harassment. And the harassment is all about perception, okay? So what may be okay for you and a friend to talk about may not be okay for someone else to overhear and to talk about. All right, last thing is the training certificate. Chief Jernigan is requiring all Sheriff's Department employees to complete this training, and to receive credit for the training, you'll need to complete the certificate. If you're watching this webinar live, download the attached certificate from the handout section on the menu bar. Down toward the bottom of the menu bar, there is a handout section. There are two attachments. The first one is the harassment policy, and the second is the training certificate. Go ahead and open up that certificate, print it out, and fill it and complete it and give it to your supervisor. If you're watching a recorded version of this webinar, you can request this certificate from your supervisor, okay? If you're watching the recorded version of this, you cannot access the handout, but you can request the certificate from your supervisor. It's very important that everyone that's watching this webinar, either live or recorded, prints out this certificate and gives it to your supervisor. And supervisors, you are required to sign that certificate stating that the employee has completed the training. Okay? We've had several questions turned in. That's great. We will stay online a few more minutes and allow you to ask those questions, and we'll make sure that we get all those answered. This concludes the training for today. Thank you guys for your attending. And again, remember, if you need to report something, personnel is always here to help you. Okay? Thank you.